Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from under the arms of the Redeemer. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. And as Justin alluded to, Brazil is in the future, but Mexico is in the past. We've got Mexican Grand Prix recap. We've got some League of Legends semifinals. We've got a lot to chat about. Justin, good to see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, good to see you too, man. I'm doing pretty well. So you know that's the name of the statue.
I do, yes.
In Rio. Very, very cool. See, I thought I was going to catch you on that one. Yeah.
It took me a second. I second guessed myself and I was like, I could sound real dumb right now, but
No, you nailed it. That's awesome. Yeah, we do have Brazil coming up, I believe on the 11th.
Yep.
It's not this weekend, the next one. But that is for IEM Rio that's going on down there in Brazil. Shout out to all the Counter-Strike global offensive players duking it out right now. We'll get into that a little bit later, but it's just a little bit of a different flavor for the show here this week. But yeah, I'm doing good. Good to see you, Aaron. How has your week been? You want to start us off here?
Absolutely. It's been a good week, Halloween week. So had a nice party with some friends over the weekend. Colleen and I dressed up as Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears when they both wore full denim. And so
Nice.
we rocked it, just like jeans, denim jacket, shirt, hat, whole nine. It was fun. Got to watch some of the Phillies games with friends, which is big right now. Of course, being in the World Series. So it's been a pretty good week. But getting into my Rose, Thorn, and Seed. My Rose is just the Phillies, watching with friends. I've just really enjoyed it. It's fun. All the excitement that's going on around like the city and getting to enjoy that with friends is pretty cool. So nothing too crazy, but really it's been, I think, 11 years since the Phillies had even made the playoffs. And so to go this far, that's pretty cool. For my Thorn this week, it's just been a little tough, I guess, at work this past week. Just lots of things coming up that are not really they're not in my job description per se, but I'm like the one who has to deal with them and take care of those things because I'm the one who like knows how to. So even though I've had more time open up from being a little less busy work-wise, I haven't been able to really nail down getting more business because I've kind of gotten pulled in a bunch of directions, which is what it is. They're things that need to get done, and since I know how to do them, it makes sense, but it's not ideal. I feel like I'd prefer to be able to focus a little more on like my sole role at the property. So
Right. So what do they call that? Is that acquisitions? Not your sole role, but like where you're saying like focus on like new endeavors. Would that be?
So it would be not necessarily not like acquiring anything, but bringing in like new renters and things like that. And so
Gotcha.
like with my role, primarily focusing on short-term rentals and things like that, it would be trying to find companies or businesses in the area that may have a need for whether it's like new employees coming into town or moving for work and things like that. And like being able to build some connections with them to try and find or broaden my market of potential like renters and all.
Gotcha.
So I have like lists of people to try and get in touch with and things like that. but I haven't been able to actively like reach out and do as much of that just due to the other things coming up around the property that just needed my attention. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, so not the worst thing in the world, because like I said, I'm doing things that need to be done. I'm keeping other things rolling, but I want to ensure that I'm doing a good job at like what I've been tasked with as well. And so I want to spend a little more time focusing in on that, but hopefully I will soon. But for my seed this week, I'm excited. We are less than 10 days till Colleen and I go on our trip out west. I think I had mentioned that she spoiled the surprise a little bit, so figured out where we were going. But that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, that's about how my week's been, my Rose, Thorn, and Seed. How are you? What's going on? What questions do you have? I see something on your mind.
Did you just say to the Grand Canyon?
No, not to the Grand Canyon.
What did you just say? Where are you going on your trip?
We're going to San Diego.
San Diego, Grand Canyon. Those don't sound similar at all.
No,
I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
No, I didn't say where it was the first time I said it. She just spoiled it. She guessed it right. That may have been what you heard. She guessed it, and then she kept saying it, and I was like, I can't really just continuously lie straight to your face again and again and again.
That is really tough.
Yeah, not the easiest, but that's all she knows. Other things I have planned, I've got ready, so it's all good. It's gonna be a fun time. But
interesting. Okay, so not the Grand Canyon, San Diego confirmed.
Confirmed.
Gotcha. Okay, so not the Grand Canyon. Just wanted to make sure.
Not the Grand Canyon.
Damn, dude. That's is that just audio dyslexia where I just filled in my own detail? I didn't care where you were going, actually. In my head canon, I wanted you to be going to the Grand Canyon.
I think you heard something and just didn't quite catch that couple words, and your brain just pieced together what sounds the closest to those words, because I think that he just said where he's going.
There you go.
So... but yeah, not the Grand Canyon.
Benefit of the doubt. I appreciate that.
That's what your brain does. It fills in the blanks sometimes. So
yes, it does. That's you're not wrong. But no, that sounds great. Unfortunate that you have a gift shaker.
Big time gift shaker. But also on the other side of it, also one of your Christmas presents came in the mail the other day. Do you want to open it? And I'm like, no, it's not Christmas. She's I think just gets overly excited about these things that are down the road. And she's like, it's too far away. I need it now. I need to know now. So
that always, and you may actually know this, that feeling always reminds me of the Dashboard Confessional song, where they actually say that out loud, where it's not it's not the price that kills you, it's the weight that's going to bring you down, 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 down. And it's the chorus or whatever. But I've been familiar with that idea for forever because of Dashboard Confessional, where it's you just want the goddamn thing to be here, and you're so excited. So I am not coming down on it, man.
Oh no, it's definitely. I mean, you've talked about it with waiting for boxes and packs and stuff to come in the mail, and
yep.
I'm just I'm not too bad at. I just put things out of my mind, and it's that is a very easy thing for me to do. Sometimes I can just sometimes too well, where things just are gone.
You forget about it. Oh, what's this?
Yeah, or I know, I've looked at the calendar 1.5 million times to see what's going on in the next couple weekends, and on Tuesday, Colleen's oh, so are you ready for blah blah? And I'm like, when is that? It's I know I've seen it on the calendar. I should know it, but the retention just doesn't always keep it. So
That's what it is. It's the retention.
yeah, so some of those things with the excitement just kind of stick a little easier when you're pumped up for something. So,
That is true.
but how has your week been? What's been going on over there in your
Uh,
home area?
in my home area, it's been going pretty good. Thank you for asking. So I'll start with my thorn because I think it's a funny one, and this may have been my thorn at some point, like 2 years ago. Because it would have been probably right around this time. The CE classes that I got to take for my
Hmm.
recertification, a bunch of it has to be in person, so I'm going to learn like new hands-on techniques, like I'd already talked about. I'd already taken one of the classes, but so these are like the ethics courses, the like the non-elect
HIPAA.
yes, like the child abuse classes and all this stuff. And it's just like the stuff that I've done a whole bunch of times. I've even taken the like class for my mom the one time. And that's ingrained in my memory. I've done it one more time than I should have. So it's just like I feel like I know this information. It stinks to have to like take a whole Saturday to do this thing again.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
and when nothing has changed too, it like that's the frustrating part. I know it's important, but it's like you should be able to just like take a quiz, like show up, take a thing, and if you pass it, like at the beginning of the class or whatever,
yeah,
like, oh, show up if you get a 90% on these 25 questions or whatever, and like have it be like semi difficult, have that be in
sure,
person. But hey,
sure.
if you pass it all, then you can go.
Yeah, that's a great idea. See, there you go, turning a thorn into a solution. I like that. That's what we're here for. So yeah, I'm not even gonna complain about it anymore. That's just a great idea. And yeah,
Hopefully,
sometimes
who do I need to talk to? How do I get this to
dude, we
happen?
gotta message the board. We gotta get the petition going. But that's a great idea. And yeah, ethics classes sometimes you just gotta refresh your brain. But so yeah, that's my thorn. My rose here for the week. My CEU that I took, still on this same theme. The muscle scraping class that I took with Sarah. The class went really well, but I had a client that I was actually able to immediately apply that strategy to. The very next session, talked to him about it, kind of explained what it was indicated for, why we would be doing it, what to expect. We were able to lay it all out pretty clear and in a way that he like seemed really excited for the treatment. So we spent an hour doing this new treatment all over the upper body, all over the rib cage and the upper back and into the scapulas, and it just went super well. Got the exact results that we were looking for. So I just thought that was a big rose where we were able to learn something, kind of internalize it a little bit, think about how it's going to apply to me and my practice or our practice, and then like go through carrying it out, and then having somebody be like ecstatic for the treatment. I think he felt better than like we've really able to hit at before. So I'm just really excited about this new treatment now that I have under my belt.
Nice, and it's not always the case that you can take something like that and immediately like be able to utilize it. Like
Right.
sometimes that's something that it's like, oh, I've added it to my bag of tools, and then you may not need that wrench for months, but then you can pull
Right.
it out. But it's cool to be able to put it into practice and actually see the effects like immediately, pretty much from that new knowledge and technique and all.
Yeah, it was sweet, and he was really excited about it. I think it's going to give us a little bit of a reinvigoration into therapy that like was still going quite well. I think we were seeing results, but just like a turbocharger, I think this really just kicked it up a notch. Um, and then my seed, this is just a dumb quick one. The one day I made an executive decision, I called Sarah up when I knew she was going to be coming home, and I said, "Hey, you better stop at the store right now, sloppy jalopy, and get us a new toaster oven because this thing sucks." Like we've had it for probably like our whole relationship. When we moved into the old apartment,
Yeah.
Yeah, when we moved into the old apartment, we had
So
gotten this new toaster oven. Go ahead.
toaster or toaster oven?
Toaster oven.
Okay.
Because I like the big thick bagels. Sometimes I like to put a non toaster item into the toaster oven.
Great
You
for
know,
pizza reheating.
exactly. You can't get that into the toaster. So we opt for the toaster oven, and now my lunchtime is cut in half, my guy. It's insane. I don't know what I was missing.
Well, and they're
Just really
not
like
that crazy expensive either. It's
no,
like probably
no,
like
it was fine.
25-30 bucks. Like,
It was fine. Yeah, it was
yeah.
great.
So that's awesome.
And it just felt like walking out of the cave for the first time again. Just like, oh, what have I been missing, man?
Discovered fire.
Yeah, seriously, like it's crazy. So
Well,
yeah,
hopefully,
that's been my.
didn't discover fire in your apartment.
I mean, it cooks so hot, we might, and I'd be like open to it. That was something my other toaster oven was no longer capable of. He couldn't ignite the fire.
It happens. It happens.
Yeah,
Just
it was,
don't burn the
it
place
was rough.
down. Don't start the fire.
No, I'm not going to start the fire because we didn't start the fire. But you know who did start the fire in the soul of Mexico? Sergio Perez.
Yes, sir. He had a nice weekend. Very
I
good
agree.
weekend. I was gonna say, lots of sparks have been flying in regard to your NASCAR video that you wanted to bring up. So
Yeah, that's a better segue.
hey,
Well,
either way, tell the people what's going on in NASCAR, because that has not been a sport, even with all the racing that I enjoy, that has intrigued me really at all.
Well, and it's funny, like, so obviously some part of my algorithm is like tied into like Formula One, IndyCar, and so like by generics, motorsport.
Right.
So, but like never any NASCAR, right?
I usually get
this-
like the extra one I usually get is MotoGP, like the
That's
motorcycle.
what I see too.
Yeah.
That's what I see too. Okay. But then this got, I guess, so many people were blowing it up. Like, because this is wild, honestly, that it was like my top recommended thing on YouTube. And I was like, oh, what is this? What do you mean a video game move? This guy is insane. And the reactions around it were just funny. I watched this. It's every angle of Ross Chastain's video game move. Go to YouTube if you want to see it. But it is a wild move at the end of a race. This guy Ross Chastain just slams his car into, I guess, turns 3 and 4 of the oval track, hammers on the gas, so he just like rode the wall like a surfer to get by these two cars that were like battling it out right in that final stint of the race. He ends up just nuking by them, like double their speed, it looks like, sliding across that wall, just near right by him, gets into the points or whatever he was looking for in the moment to be like into the next round or whatever it is.
I think it was to make it to like the final 4 people of like going to FedEx Cup championships or something like that. He needed like 2 points or something, and those cars were the cars.
Dude, and he blows right by them, and everybody's just like, well, I guess we're out then. Yeah, that was pretty insane. I guess we're out. So like it was the perfect blend in the reactions of they were ecstatic to have witnessed such a thing, but they hated the fact that it knocked them out. It was hilarious.
Well, and so I want to like, what is your opinion on the move? Because I saw a video, an interview of another NASCAR driver. I forget who it was, but he was like butthurt about it, and it didn't even affect him. It wasn't like he was one of those guys that got like he was just like, oh, I just don't think that it's like very like he basically called it like unsportsmanlike, and like
I can see that.
I can't like. It's a move. It's a balls to wall. Like it could have failed so hard.
Right.
He could have touched the wall and then gone spinning across the track, taking someone out, like not even crossed the finish line. Like it was a gutsy move. He made it in the moment, like very just decisively. Yeah. And I think personally, like a lot of people aren't super excited about NASCAR. If it gets some excitement about your sport out there, like that's also a good thing. Cause like your sport is not as like in the mainstream media as a lot of other sports, and it went viral, this move. So people are going to be interested to see like, oh, like what ends up happening to this Ross Chastain guy. Like, does he end up next race being successful, like having a day of it, like, or is it just he had this 15 minutes of fame?
Well, yeah, I tend to agree with you. Like, if it gets a spotlight that isn't like an egregious, malicious, vicious, mean, or any of these things like towards anybody, I don't think it's getting traction for like any of the wrong reasons. It's just like this hyper interesting moment in a motorsport. I'm not saying I agree with the driver that was interviewed. I can just see a driver's point of view in that scenario where it almost feels like you're breaking the game in some way, where yes, it's not in the written rules, but it's this move that like nobody does for obvious reasons. It's like it's a this, it's a that, it's this. But that's what's so crazy about these things is after a certain point, the only option that's outside of the box is the one that everybody thought like they weren't going to do. But if it's not against the rule, if it's not written in the rules, homie, I have a hard time like chastising the driver.
Right. I really,
because like you said, there's a lot of risk.
I dislike unwritten rules in things in general. Like there are ones that I still respect, but I don't like this idea of like unwritten rules. Like baseball has a lot of them of like, oh, you're not supposed to do this, or you're not supposed to do that, or oh, you don't when your team's winning by a lot, and the pitcher's having a tough day and he has a 3-ball and 0-strike count, you're supposed to watch the next pitch. Like that is the one of the unwritten rules of baseball is if your team's winning by a lot and this guy could either walk you or throw the first strike of the at-bat, you're supposed to let it go. A player got not in trouble, but he got chastised for it a couple of years ago because he just absolutely nuked a baseball into like space on a 3-0 count when his team was up like 8 runs. And I'm like, good. That's exciting. That's cool to watch. I saw this home run and I don't follow that team at all. Like, that's cool. And there's all these old people who are like, no, you're just rubbing salt into the wound. You're just trying to run up the score. And it's like, if you don't want the ball to get nuked into like the next dimension, then throw a better pitch. Like that is the solution.
Yeah, that just seems dumb to me.
Like, don't let the guy do that. Throw better or.
Well, okay, but that's like a culture thing and like a weird.
Well, but I think this is too in NASCAR. It's like he's kind of going and he's like, they're like, you're not supposed to do this because it's like you're, I don't know, like taking advantage of something that's like not supposed to be done. And so it's like or not intended to be done. Not that it's not supposed to be. It's
and it's so crazy that we don't feel like we should have to write it in the rules.
Right. And like this is like a very rare situation. This is a track that has very tight turns, so that's why the other cars were going much slower. Like
Right.
in a typical oval track, like those guys are flying out of those last corners and everything. If you're
Sure.
coming around the last corner at Daytona Speedway and you decide to try and slingshot or like riding the wall, like you're going to lose time because of the friction of the wall slowing you down.
Sure.
This is
Okay.
a like very rare scenario. It's not something that people are going to be like, "Oh, wait, I can do that." Like it's
But what
not.
if they do? That would be the most interesting part to me, if like this becomes the meta and then they have to like write it out of the rules,
But that
or like write it
happens.
into the
That
rules.
happens
Yeah.
sometimes, and it's
And
like,
that's when it becomes interesting.
but
Where
I
like,
don't
what if
expect it
this
to.
is, what do you mean? Put a skid plate on the side of your car and just fucking run the
Well,
wall?
so the reason that I don't think this will become an issue is because they can't like I thought about that already. I am fairly certain you can't just like mount like the vehicles in NASCAR are very like homogenous.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, I know, I got
every
you.
car body is the same essentially. They just
So
have
they can't
different
just rock
they
up
just
with
have
wall
different
armor.
they just have different engines. Yeah, you can't put a wheel on the side of your car that you just like fucking cruise and
That's
that's
what
just
I'm
like
talking
rolling.
about.
Yeah, no, like I am I'd say like 99% sure that all of the bodies have to be a very specified like build and everything for the
Sure.
cars. It's the engine differences, the tire wear, fuel loads, things like that that are the primary differences in strategy and whatnot.
Right. So what are we saying here? We think this is just a fun way to get up into the top four, and other than that,
I think it's an exciting moment that probably could never happen again. The between the situation, the track, the opportunity, like I don't see this happening and working to like that magnitude
sure.
on that scale like potentially ever again. Like I don't think this is the first time someone's thought of that. I think it's the first time that it's like actually worked out probably if someone has tried it previously.
I would
Um,
love to see a hypercut of like 5 or 6 times that it's failed, and then see Ross's with like the final countdown music of and him
eh,
just fucking owning those two cars.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a really cool moment. It's good eyes on the sport and everything.
For sure.
So I'm all for it. Another person who was all for it, Fernando Alonso, tweeted out, he's like, that's just like when you would play like racing games and just turn off damage. Like, he's like, that's awesome. Um, and another thing that's awesome is Fernando Alonso's P7 got reinstated that had gotten taken away previous to last episode.
They did
So
that just for you, bud.
they
They did
did.
that just for you.
Yep, I whined enough about it, and they're like, all right.
Yeah, they heard you.
Yeah,
Well,
so,
no, it's funny. It's funny that it's Alonso that like goes to bat for this dude, because he's the one that was just like, I'm pretty sure it was at Mexico last year at turn one where he like saw everybody about to like get all bunched up. He's like, "Ah, fuck it," and he just cut the turn.
I think it might have been Mexico. I think you might be right, but yeah, just ready to just
Ready
send it.
to bend the rules a little bit,
Hey,
bend expectations, I guess you could say. And I hope that people are inspired to ride the wall a little bit more.
yeah, it's fun. It's exciting. Don't fuck up your cars doing it, but good luck. But another penalty I wanted to talk about, the Red Bull penalty was laid out, so they get a 10% reduction in wind tunnel time over the next 12 months and a $7 million fine for breaching the salary cap, or the budget cap, that is. So, I mean, unfortunate for them as a team. I think it's a pretty like reasonable punishment. I don't think we talked. Did we talk last episode about this at all?
I don't think so.
I didn't think we
It's a
did.
good update.
So that's the update. A lot of people feel like it's not enough. I think personally, I would have rather seen the financial penalty go against the coming year's budget cap. Like maybe a smaller penalty, but have it go against the budget cap to like penalize them, as opposed to a lot of people are upset because they're like, oh, Red Bull doesn't care. $7 million, they like that doesn't affect them. They can just throw that money like at the FIA.
Right.
But the wind tunnel time, I think, is a huge detriment. I don't think people realize with them winning the Constructors' Championship, they already only get 70% of the win time that the last place team gets. So
Right.
they're already only getting 70%. That's cut down by, I believe it's 10% of the 70. So they would be down to 63% of Williams' allotted time.
Gotcha.
Wind tunnel time. So I think that's a pretty significant difference, but definitely some controversy and some differing opinions out there in the F1 world on it.
And I don't know. I mean, yeah, fair enough, I guess. I think that's fine. I don't know anything about penalizing these teams, but the idea of like being a looker on and saying like, "Oh, what's $7 million to these orgs?" Like,
Well,
I don't know.
the biggest thing is a lot of people are like, "Oh, 7 million doesn't matter because of all the sponsorships and yada 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 you get from winning." They're like, "Oh, like cheated your way to a world championship, so all the extra things that you get from that, like the 7 million is probably nothing in comparison to all the extra money and whatever else." That's the biggest issue, and people, of course, are also attributing that to this coming year or this current year's like wins as well, even though the Abu Dhabi controversy and the budget cap breach were in the same year. So, like, best case scenario, Red Bull got one driver's championship out of it. A lot of people are like, oh, they got two drivers' championships and a world championship for $7 million. And it's like, it's not quite how that works, but
Yeah, I just think those like reasons or arguments are always just like so reductive and simplistic where it's like
they are.
yeah like what can you even say? It's like
Right.
okay,
Well, yeah,
you
it's like
know.
there's no winning that conversation, which is like I've seen a ton of them on Twitter. I just avoid, like, I don't chirp in because
Sure.
it's not worth it in my opinion, because F1 Twitter is very toxic at some moments. So it's just a lot of people who are fans of their drivers, and they're unhappy when things don't go their way, and what if it's not what they deem fair, then that's an issue, and there's too many people that are willing to spew their opinions out there onto the internet, so you're just not ever gonna win. Like, and no, every single person is probably lacking in their knowledge of some part of the argument too. Like, it's not
Hmm.
like a bunch of well-informed people who have read through the articles, who, like, I've read through a decent bit, and I'm sure there's still things that I'm missing from it all. And
Sure.
so there's no winning in like those conversations. But yeah, a lot of people unhappy with the penalty, feeling it's too light. I think it's pretty reasonable for the most part. But
Yeah, like what else are you gonna do? Like you trying to debilitate the team? Like I don't know.
that's what people want. That be
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
fine. Okay.
they're not fans of Red Bull, so they're like, oh yeah, absolutely, tank them into the ground. Like, they're just being haters as opposed to supporters of their own team. Like, it's no longer rooting for your own team. It's just like rooting for the other guy to like fail or get like penalized or whatever.
Sure, but then so that means like they're not even a fan of, and this is always my argument where it's like that means you're not even a fan truly of the spirit of the competition, because that means that you are down for your team like winning under the pretense of the other team being held down by something. Like,
Or even a lot of them going to the extent of, well, I can't wait to see Mercedes and Ferrari accidentally break the budget cap next year
right,
and like build these like supercars that are gonna drive circles around like they're like, well, if they did it, so they're not fans of the actual nature and the respect of the competition at all.
right.
They don't care. They just want their team to win. So that's why you can't like have a reasonable discussion on it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, hopefully that, hopefully that kind of a punishment sets a precedent moving forward, and if it becomes like egregious from teams, step it up.
I think that's my other like recommendation is repeat offenders being like having incrementally increased punishments. I think that's a
Yeah.
reasonable thing so that you can be like, hey, like, yeah, maybe like we kind of were like, hey, this is good for this situation. We don't feel like it was done in any sort of like intentional way. So, but you're still
Right.
getting penalized. You still broke
Right.
the rule.
Right.
So,
That I agree with.
if you do it again and you don't pay close enough attention, yeah, like penalize them harder. Like that's how I feel it should be. So,
Yeah, make it 17 mil. Like, then make it be backbreaking.
right.
I just don't agree with like, okay, the first year of a cost
Oh,
cap.
yeah.
It's like, stop, dude. Can we like be just a little reasonable here, man?
Nah, F1 Twitter is anything but reasonable. So it's that's just the way it goes. But it's the content that I'm frequently seeing. So it's
Sure.
always
Sure.
intriguing to kind of look at from the outside and just
And take it with
be
a grain of salt.
lurker a little bit.
Take it with a grain of salt from me. Like, I've got Red Bull in my mouth, clearly. It's just like I'm just here to have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So it is what it is. But other news, Hulkenberg looks like he has a good shot at the Haas seat. I know we've mentioned it, but talks are still continuing. So I'm not really sure where that leaves Mick, other than I know that Audi, when they're entering as the Sauber team in 2024 or 2020, I forget, whatever year it is, they are interested in having an all German driver lineup.
Oh, that's cool.
Which would be cool. A German company, they want to have German drivers, but I know Mick had been interviewed. People had asked him about it a little bit, and he's like, that's kind of far off. Like he's worried about next year's seat and hopefully getting it. So I think I think we both agree. I still think he deserves or he has earned another year in that seat, but I don't know.
I don't know. I think on merit he's done well enough, but unfortunately, I'm not sure, or it at least doesn't seem like Formula One is the spot for well enough. But then you wonder, how come Nick Latifi has had a seat for so long, or how come this person's had a seat for so long?
And this is his first year in a reasonable car. It's only his second year in F1, and last year's car was a joke. Like,
has he made too many mistakes though to really think he's like gonna be improving enough? I think he's made too many mistakes to like be worth it.
so you go for the guy that hasn't raced competitively other than here or there since 2019, who also had his fair share of accidents, who
Hmm.
in his long tenure of F1 also has never had a podium.
Yeah, I don't like that option either.
Yeah, like I think in no, like I liked Hulk and the idea of him a couple years ago potentially coming back, but I mean let's see, Nico Hulkenberg is
I don't think he's going to have the
35.
resurgence like Alonso has.
No, he's
Right.
35. He is like getting towards he's in the upper bracket age group of all F1 current F1 drivers. Like I
Yep.
just don't imagine that move. If they wanted to like go for a young F2 driver or something that just like is knocking it out of the park and we're like, "Hey, we gave Mick a shot, didn't work. On to the next one." I just don't see that being the move that is going to make it successful at Haas.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty reasonable to say. I would tend to agree with you. Um and but maybe Haas is like, well, maybe we don't see him long term, so it's better to just rip the band-aid off now because everybody's going to hate us later for like getting rid of a Schumacher.
Yeah, I mean, you could potentially see it that way. It's just, I think that Mick is getting better, and I think that
Yeah.
he is above the level of a couple other drivers on the grid, or at least
Yep.
competitive with like with less years of experience and things like that. I think he's shown glimmers of hope for him to be a decently successful driver. I don't think anyone's seen anything from him that they're like, oh my god, this is like his dad reincarnate. Like I don't think that is what anyone's looking for, but I think he is a someone who could be in the right contracts and circumstances, a like 5 6 year middle to like top of the infield or top of the midfield kind of driver.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I don't see him winning a world championship based on what I've seen, but that's also okay. Like there are plenty of
Right.
drivers that are in F1 who have what people would consider successful careers without ever winning a world championship.
Right. Yeah, and so there's the element of like, is Haas a team that's in a like kind of a building phase? Like, yeah, I would say so. So from that angle, they likely have some time to work with, like you're saying, an improving driver who has shown glimmers.
Yeah.
And that may be a better option than, some of the other things on the table. So I can, from Haas's perspective, I think I could see it either way.
But are they just going back to like basically what they were doing before with like this is basically just going to be Magnussen and Grosjean again. Like
Right.
it's Magnussen and Hulk. Like it's two guys who've been around for a long time. Like if they're actually trying to build for the future, I feel like a young driver is the better opportunity.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking, where it's
Yeah,
like the pros probably outweigh the cons here, is kind of what I'm thinking.
yeah. But I know
Beat
that
me.
we'll probably hear in the next couple of weeks what happens. I would hope with this being the last few weeks of the F1 season, with Brazil
Yep.
and Abu Dhabi being the last races. Um, with that as well, Daniel Ricciardo's future seems a little more certain as of today. Nothing official, but there's a lot of speculation and ties to him going to be a Mercedes reserve driver instead of Red Bull, which was what I had been seeing in the media last week. So
Hmm.
I think my biggest curiosity with Danny is if he, with him leaving F1, because it doesn't seem as though he's interested in any of the seats that are available this year still.
Yeah.
Do you think he will race in F1 again?
Yes, based on the willingness for a team to take Alonso back, based on the willingness for a team to take Hulkenberg back. Yeah, I think there's at least the room for it to be possible. I
Okay.
remember the conversations previously where I was pretty surprised that they would bring somebody back who had left. I didn't know that was like really something that teams would consider. So just kind of based on that, probably. I'm
Alonso's
curious.
a little of an enigma, though, being a double world champion. I feel like that is a easier person to bring back
Yeah, big
than
time.
just an 8-time race winner. But I mean,
Yeah, big
that's
time.
still a successful career in F1. Very
Yeah.
actually, like very successful.
And I just use it to illustrate that like teams are at least willing to do it, right?
That's true.
Where
Yeah.
you know, um, even yeah, his accolades are pretty excessive. So like that's something to consider. But yeah, I so to answer your question, do I see it possibly happening? Yeah. Do I see it probably happening? No.
Yeah. That's kind of
Unfortunately, yeah, I think some people's times are just over.
That's kind of where I'm at. I do think that taking a reserve drive with Mercedes or Red Bull does give the best opportunity of being out of F1
Yeah.
and coming back, being with one of the top three teams in that position. So I do think it's interesting as well because obviously Red Bull, I'm sure their structure and different things have changed plenty since Danny was there on the team. But I'm curious from his own personal experience and like what he's bringing from being in the Red Bull system to Mercedes, if that does end up happening, if that will give them a little bit of an extra edge in that head-to-head battle, maybe.
Maybe.
So it's interesting, but nothing, like I said, officially announced as of yet.
Right. Yeah, he may be able to tell them which locker Max keeps his boots in.
I mean, you never know. Like,
It could be the secret that saves them.
swap out his shoes for a size smaller so it's not noticeable until he tries to put them on.
Damn.
Devious.
That'd be pretty maleficent, dude.
Maleficent.
Yeah. I mean, isn't her name just like two words combined?
Yeah, basically.
There you
And
go.
two
I use her
fit.
name as an adjective.
There you go. It works. Um, the other, and leading into the Mexican Grand Prix, so the other hot news on the paddock was Red Bull boycotting Sky Sports interviews and all throughout the weekend due to primarily comments from Ted Kravitz, but just in general, a feeling of Sky Sports not treating the team or Max fairly with their commentary over the past while. So that
Now, do
was
you like hear that at all? Like, do you know what he said? Because I just hear the like international broadcast.
so well. It was things primarily in like the pre-race stuff. But Ted essentially like he was said things and has continued to like say things to the effect of Hamilton was robbed and all just talking about primarily Abu Dhabi and like he said one of his comments was up it looks like Max can't win a world championship in a normal way or something like that in like referring to Abu Dhabi and then the cost cap breach and whatnot and things
Sure.
so like just a lot and those were just two recent ones that but I mean I can understand like any opportunity that and there was one at the US Grand Prix where Ted was basically like he was like laying out the scene and like the storytelling of he's like, oh, like Lewis Hamilton, like he loses, he's robbed of a championship, and then he goes into this race where he has a crappy car the next year, but then they get it up to a place where he goes in and he has the potential to be competitive, and then his victory is snatched away by the man that robbed him of his like championship the year prior, and it could have
Latifi?
You got him, ladies and gentlemen. We got him. But yeah, it's just like comments like that and all, and I can understand because, like I said, F1, especially on Twitter, is like a very toxic place. Like Max gets tons and tons of ridicule and hate from anyone who's not a fan of Red Bull, and like I think that's pretty unfair thing to do. It's neither of these situations occurred because of Max. One was due to whatever the accounting team for Red Bull. The other one was due to a decision Michael Massey made. Like neither of these things had anything to do with like Max actively like doing anything outside of the rules or anything crazy. And everyone is just like, he's a cheater, he's not a real champion, and all those things. And like they see it as just winding up these people who are already like who are already being out there on Twitter and whatnot. And so
right.
I mean, personally, they just did it for Mexico. I think it's a statement. Like they still did their contractually required interviews and things like that that are required of like post race or like winning or any of those kinds of interviews, but they just didn't have any personal like interviews or give any comments to Sky Sports or any of their affiliates during that race. I think that's like, right. Hey, if you're gonna boycott something, hey, go for it. I think the biggest it's like a very odd line because Sky Sports UK, obviously they're British channel. They're going to have a personal bias towards British drivers, like particularly Lewis. And I understand that. However, my issue that I think I take with the kind of biases and everything is like, so like here on the podcast, you and I, we're both Red Bull fans. We are very blatant about that, but we do try to be pretty impartial in our discussions and how we look at things and all. Like, yes, we have people we root for, teams we root for, but we try to be pretty unbiased, I think, in our general commentary and like breakdown of things as much as we can. I think on...
What about this angle, though? Like, are we Red Bull fans, or is that team just at, like, the top of the conversation because they're at the top of the grid? Like, just because we talk about Red Bull and Max often doesn't, like, implicitly make me, like, or us fans.
Yeah, well, I personally will say, like, I'm a Red Bull fan and a fan of Max, like, thereof. Like, I got into F1, like, primarily, like, interested in the Red Bull team and everything. I didn't want to just hop on the Mercedes bandwagon. I don't like to be a bandwagon hopper and, like, when I join something new, just pick the team that's doing the best and be like, that's my team. Like... But, I mean, the Drive to Survive series with Danny Ricks, like, I really like Danny Ricks, his personality, everything. I was like, oh, you got to see more of Red Bull. I was like, oh, this is cool. I like them. And then Danny Ricks left. I was like, wait, I'm not just going to hop teams just willy-nilly now that I had decided. So, I mean, yeah, I'll say, at least for myself, I'm a Red Bull fan, and I root for Max and I root for Checo. However, I try to do my best to give a pretty unbiased perspective of what I think is going on. I try to give fair time to the other drivers, to the other teams as well.
Right, and that's why I stopped you, because I don't think you ever, like, it doesn't feel like we're ever giving, like, him all of the time and just saying, like, yeah, these other racers were in the race too. Like, I acknowledge that, yeah, you may be a personal fan of his, but I don't believe that comes through all that glaringly, like, in our, like, analysis or talking about the race. I just think he's the main character a lot, so we're just, like, talking about him, unfortunately.
Right. Well, and I try not to be that way too, and I think that is the difficulty, especially, like, Ted Kravitz is very vocal about his opinions on these things and everything, and his biases.
That's probably one of the reasons they have him.
And his biases shine through very clearly. And I think the issue I take with it primarily is, yes, if you are an F1 TV subscriber or anything, like, yes, there is another broadcast you can listen to, the international broadcast with, like, different commentary and everything going on. The predominantly broadcasted, like, commentary and broadcast is the Sky Sports UK broadcast, where that's the ESPN broadcast. That's like ESPN slaps their logos on things, and they have the Sky Sports, like, broadcast for when they put it on TV.
They don't use nationally Damon Hill.
No, so the U.S. nationally broadcasted F1 broadcast is the Sky Sports UK broadcast.
I understand.
So, in my opinion, just in terms of journalism, in terms of fairness and everything, I do feel like you should keep your biases out of that as much as possible if you're going to be a public figure who is discussing, like, especially, like, a broadcast of the race and everything. I think you should generally just be as unbiased as you can. So I can understand the frustrations coming from Red Bull, because this is being broadcast, like, everywhere, like, as the standard for most people.
I didn't understand
and
that.
So a lot of folks are just hearing this and taking it as fact, as opposed to taking it with a grain of salt, not understanding, like, oh, these guys are British. The British guy lost because of the situation and how things panned out at Abu Dhabi. So that is, like, so, and their biases are coming through in that. So I thought it was a, like, pretty reasonable course as well for Red Bull to be like, yeah, we're just going to boycott interviews with you guys, because, like, we don't like the way that you're talking, so, like, we're just not going to talk to you. Like, I don't think that's a crazy thing, and it's just, like, again, Red Bull got a lot of backlash from a lot of, like, people on, like, in public. Like, it's like, well, aren't you happy? Like, you don't like them now, you don't have to listen to them either. So, like, isn't that cool? Like, both sides can be happy.
Yeah, you would think so.
But
they enjoy the hate watch, you know.
They do. But leading into the Mexico Grand Prix, what were you thinking, I guess, going into it? I think my first initial thought going into actual race day was, how is Max going to do starting in P1? Because that is not typically the best position on that track due to the long straightaway and then right hand turn that the P2 position is on the inside of the track.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I forget what they said. I think it's the last like 3 or 4 races. The like P1 has not led after or has not led the first lap.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of my initial thing to watch coming into the race.
Yeah, and I think that was a big part of the like post qualifying conversation was the Mercedes in the second and third spot, and then they talked about the stat where I'm pretty sure it's been P3 that's won the last couple of races, as well as the pole position not being like that great as well. But something told me that like historical data may not necessarily apply here. Like the Red Bulls have just been very quick. So I was interested at that, but it wasn't like the biggest thing on my mind. I was pretty interested in the qualifying from Mercedes, them being 2-3. Obviously, has been their best result this year leading up to
Yeah.
this point. So it's just interesting to see the team like not giving up at all, where we were in a position last year where we just had to keep talking about Haas in the sense of like, oh, they're not doing anything, they're not developing, they're just racing this vehicle. It's fun to see Mercedes pushing so hard, even when some things have already been decided. The P2 in the Constructors Championship has not been decided yet.
No, it's
And
definitely within reach.
right. So that's really exciting. And their qualifying performance gave them a really good shot at like moving towards that goal. So I guess leading into race Sunday, that's what I was pretty interested in.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point as well because I know we've kind of kept tabs on them, how they're doing. We watched the early season with Lewis, kind of being the test driver for a bit in races, trying to figure
Hmm.
out different things with the car and all. And to see them now at this point to have gone so far and improved so much over the season,
Hmm.
that's extremely impressive. So yeah, a start in P2, P3 is huge, especially when they haven't had the 1 lap pace either over the season, let alone that race pace. It was also interesting seeing the different tire strategies. We saw both Red Bulls come in on the soft tires, both Mercedes go on the mediums.
Hmm.
I kind of, and I mentioned on the broadcast, I was a little surprised that they didn't split strategies in an attempt to try and shake things up with Red Bull like they have
Hmm.
done in past years with running someone on soft, someone on the mediums, like trying to get the undercut or like pressure someone enough that they get more tire drag and things like that. Mercedes just seemed kind of content to be like, we're on the mediums. We just think that's the right strategy, and we're just gonna stick with it. Which I can respect, but it did surprise me a little bit to not see them try and put a little more pressure on the Red Bulls with maybe a soft tire at the beginning on one of the drivers.
And especially considering that throughout the race, especially once you were getting towards the like second pit window where some of the teams were thinking about or would have been thinking about going in for their second pit stop. George and Lewis were on the radio pretty consistently asking, why are we on the or why are we on the hard tire? We should be on the mediums.
Yeah,
Russell was calling pretty hard for a box. However, the Mercedes pit wall was pretty confident that the mediums were going to be falling off towards the end of the race. So that was a big thing that me and Sarah were talking about, actually, where I'm curious what the practice sessions were like where they had such a bad read on the like degradation data on either the mediums or didn't know what the pace was going to be on the hards, because it seemed like a really like just bullheaded, bullish move to just like be hearing that feedback from the drivers consistently, but still saying like, oh no, they're gonna fall off. Where I mean, maybe
So
they were, but like
I
the Red
th-
Bulls were fine.
I think that was the issue with their strategy. They probably have data that showed the medium tires are only going to last X amount of time, yada, yada,
Yeah,
yada. The Red Bull cars have been so good all year at not having bad tire deg. Like
mm-hmm.
we've only had like I think I forget if it was early in the season. It might have been Monza or something like no, not even Monza. It might have been even before that that we saw the Ferrari car just like outpacing the Red Bull because of like not having the tire degradation and everything that they were seeing. We saw like Leclerc and Max battling it out and everything, and Leclerc having just fresher tires. And I think maybe Mercedes were like, oh, this is the deg we're seeing, so like there's no way to go from softs to mediums and just do a
Sure.
one stop race. So we have to go for the hards. And when they said, oh, like Red Bull's on doing softs and mediums, hey, we have this opportunity. Their tires will fall off at the end of the race, that the hards will still be going. So that will put us in a position where they'll either have to pit again
Mm-hmm.
and go for a two stop and see if they can beat us, or we'll just outpace them at the end of the race. And
Right.
the medium tires just held on like freaking steel grip for the Red Bull guys. They just cruised on them. It was
Mm-hmm.
easy. Um, I mean, like a what 15-second gap for Max out front at the end of the race. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was not closing in the way that the pit wall thought they would be. Which yeah, like I said, just surprises me that they weren't willing to make the pivot when the drivers were actually giving them the right read. That was like actually like pretty frustrating to hear. Where you want to believe that the pit wall has all of the data, but actually in this scenario, like the driver's instinct was just a little bit better.
yeah, and it's tough too. Like it's a very Mexico City is a very odd race in general because you're in a very hot climate. However, you're in really high altitude. So
Mm-hmm.
the way that tires are going to work and things like that, everything changes because anytime you shift the air pressure and temperature, those are going to give drastically different results on any vehicle in this kind of
Mm-hmm.
race. So
Sure.
I think maybe in this situation, it's also a little bit of a lack of data, but still immensely impressive that Mercedes was able to get car in second and third to start, finish P2, P4. Um, I mean, Sergio really didn't have much of a shot at uh, catching Lewis after about the midway point in the race. I felt like he wasn't just ever able to close that gap up, and I think obviously it's tough in the dirty air and everything. It's not as bad this year as it's been in past years, but that was just a real great showing from Mercedes. And um, I mean, Brazil is Lewis's second home, so
Well, I
um,
might actually say it was an okay showing from Mercedes. Like they could have won the race if they were able to make a pivot soon enough. I actually think they could have closed the gap at least.
well, so the problem. So what do you think they should have done? They would have.
Not stayed out on the hards at a like once the drivers were telling them like, "Hey, I don't think these are working. Can we get on something else?" Because
Okay.
did they? Because they started on the mediums,
Right,
correct?
because that's where
So
I was thinking. I was like, they started on the mediums already. Like, they couldn't have gone medium to medium. They could go medium, medium, soft, and maybe that would have worked out. But you
well,
still got to
and that's
think
what I'm thinking.
the second pit stop, you're losing, I think, because with no safety cars or anything, you're losing about 22 seconds.
Yeah.
And Max, outside of the virtual safety car laps,
Hmm.
was in the 122 second, like his times for per lap started with 122 for
Okay.
every lap from like lap 25 through 71. Like he
Okay.
did not really lose time at the end. So I not saying that it couldn't have been possible. I think it's still likely would have looked very similar in the finish.
Mainly what I'm thinking is the old like League of Legends adage where you'd rather see five players make the wrong move together than see five players make different decisions.
And yeah, and hearing them kind of going back and forth, not agreeing with, yeah, like I
Yep.
think that's,
Make the pivot together and find out that like, hey, it actually just would have been the same, you being on the
right.
hards versus the softs, but I'm happy as a team we listened, took the
Mm,
gamble, went on to the softs because then we know what that looked like.
yeah.
That's all I'm really thinking of is
No,
like,
I think that's a pretty reasonable thing because earlier in the season we've talked about with Ferrari like how they were just like forcing strategies on Charles in particular,
yes.
and he's like, I don't know about this. Like, what's going on? Why are we doing these things? And then they flip the other way, and they're like, so what do you want to do? So how like is that tire you want? Which tires do you want to come in now?
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
make all the decisions instead of being collaborative and going, hey, how do the tires feel? We're seeing the hards not do super well at this race on X driver's car. Like, do you feel like we should go for it, or do you think we should maybe pivot strategies? I mean, it's not
Mhm.
like Ferrari has any lack of strategies, or we've heard like strategy E, strategy F, like they're going through
Sure.
half the alphabet. So I think I well I not think I totally agree with you that I would want to see teams like working together on those
Yeah,
strategies and all
that's really all.
because it does matter what the feel is like and things like that. Like if the drivers know if their tires are graining, they know what that feels like. They know what that looks
Mhm.
like. They know and the pit wall can say, "Oh, like yeah, like your tires are going to go through this graining phase, but Vettel pitted on lap 5 for real early pit stop, and he got through the graining phase, and he is like cruising now. Like
Right.
that's the information you get from the pit wall that you guys can like work together. You need both to be making like the best possible decision.
Definitely. So I guess my argument comes from like would they like have won the race? I don't care. I'm just saying it would have been
It would have been a better chance to
to
take
just do it as a team instead of this dissonance on the radio where the
right.
drivers weren't happy and the pit wall was like trying to shoehorn.
Mm,
So decent race from Mercedes, but like that's just like a spectator's gripe, I guess you could say.
no, I think that's a pretty reasonable one because like I said, I don't know. The only thing that I would be potentially concerned about in terms of like pivoting from what they did is I could imagine Red Bull going 1-2 potentially in that scenario as easily as I could see it going the other way and
Of
Mercedes
course.
like potentially winning because if you do pit again onto the softs and then you have to get past Checo, that's not going to be easy either. So
And then it may just
like
ruin those tires.
so forcing yourself into an overtake is also like a difficult decision, but I think I agree. I would have liked to see them really go for it and actually be like, hey, we think this is going to give us a shot at winning, as opposed to going, hey, we think that their car might slow down enough. Not like,
Right.
oh, this is what's going to make our car quicker and we can put in these lap times and gain. They're like, oh, like, we're going to cross our fingers and toes and hope that Red Bull slows down and
Right.
not that we make up time.
Exactly. Yeah, like waiting for their strategy to fail instead of like playing to their outs. And that's kind of what it felt like to me is like, oh, you didn't I don't think they played to their outs there.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but it's still progress in the car and everything, and
Big time. Big
huge,
time.
like just immensely like better performance than what we were seeing early. Another immensely better performance, Danny Ricks. All he had to do was fucking dive bomb Yuki, and he was free and clear. That was wild.
And just like you were happy about Alonso being, reinstated, I'm actually glad this happened like so close to it because this is one where it damn near similar incident, but because it happened later in the race, the penalty for him was more severe, right? And I think this was like a good illustration of just where that line of reasoning comes from for the like from the FIA to see
Yeah.
like, okay, they are actually like applying it differently at a different point in the
Right.
race.
Definitely.
But yeah, just big time overall unfortunate for Yuki. And then for Daniel to just be like, all right, well, I got to beat out this 10-second penalty and probably go and have his best like
Unreal.
stint.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he was the best of the rest. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Driver of the day even. I love how quickly people forget that he took out a driver.
oh, I know. Like,
And they're just like, yeah, we love the overtakes. What?
love the overtake. It's the love for Danny Ricks. It's the sadness about him leaving. I think
It's
all
egregious.
of those came into play. But I was somewhat appalled that someone who absolutely just hammered someone out of the race
Yes.
gets driver
Yes.
of the
I was
day.
like, why is he the
I mean,
driver of the day?
Not that driver of the day means anything, but it also was probably the most excitement that came out of that race. Like, the race overall was not super thrilling.
No, it wasn't a good race.
It was interesting because you're waiting to see how these tire strategies pan out. But just sitting there
for the
and
pit wall to be wrong.
sitting there and waiting through 71 laps to just be like, oh, is it gonna happen? That's not very fun, as opposed to
No.
like so like it was interesting, not exciting. But
Sure.
he brought the excitement nonetheless, and I do feel for Yuki because that was some bad luck. I feel for Fernando as well here. He has a ridiculous amount of DNFs this year. Like, to no fault of his own, just like the car dying on him. And his car, I think they were saying he was talking about how basically it felt like he was the only car that retires for Alpine. So, I mean, he is DNF'd 5 times now.
What are those tracks?
So he
I'm curious
DNF'd.
if it's heat related.
So Saudi Arabia,
Okay.
Italy at Emilia Romagna,
Okay.
Italy again, Italy again, Singapore, and then Mexico.
Gotcha.
Whereas
Other than the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, all the other 4 of those tracks are like higher temperature, like higher ambient temperature.
yeah, so it's possible that is
Is it like an overheating issue?
Yeah, but definitely he was pretty frustrated. I feel for him because he was having a phenomenal race. He was doing ahead of Ricardo up until that point. He was in P7, and then his engine died, and he's like losing 4 seconds a lap, and everyone's like, oh, they're gaining on Alonso. It's like, his car's broken. Like, come on, guys. They're like, people are like, oh, the double overtake on Alonso. It's like, guys, his car is like coughing. His car is coughing smoke out the front of it like it's in the movie Cars. Like, I'm like, this is not like the other cars just like having this huge advantage. I'm like, he's just on 3 legs out there.
It really does sound terrible when those engines go.
Oh, it's brutal. And the
Like,
just anytime I see the puff of smoke out the back, I'm just like, ooh. There's never a time I've seen a puff of smoke out of the back of an F1 car that I'm like, oh, maybe he can keep going.
sure,
Like,
yeah, it's like, oh, that's probably a good thing.
or like, oh, he just must have hit the nitrous. Like,
Right.
I'm just like, puff of smoke. I'm like, oh, something's on fire. That's bad.
Yeah.
So,
Nitrous.
big bummer for Fernando. How does Nick Latifi get lapped by his teammate? Albon lapped him.
I think at this point, it's all just a ruse to make Albon look better. That's the only reason Latifi's there.
They're sacking
Albon
him to...
Yeah, Albon has actually has promised Latifi 50% of all of his earnings for this, like, little bit of a prop up here at the end.
It's like, I'll pay your entry fee into IndyCar. Like,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. If you let me lap you a couple times and slap you around.
Like, that's just wild, though. I would... To see like, the same cars, same upgrades, everything, and to see his teammate lap him, that is brutal. And I do also respect Albon in, like, he has done a fantastic job of taking care of tires on those Williams cars this year. He, like, I mean, that's what got him the first points of the season for himself, where he rode a ridiculous amount of time around the track on one set of tires, like pitted on the second to last lap or whatever it was. So I know he's good at that, but like, that was egregious. So I feel like you might be like, but I think they might be tipping a little too hard that what they're doing.
I agree. They're throwing too many sandbags onto Nick Latifi's car. Maybe
Brutal.
one too many sandbags.
Just brutal. But outside of that, Valtteri Bottas got some points, or a point. He had a nice qualifying run and everything. So happy to see him back getting Alfa Romeo points after a long stretch of the season where he was struggling. But were there any other big hit points that you wanted to touch on? Because I know we've got some League of Legends to get into.
Not really. We kind of hit on all the points that I had here for most of the major teams, and even some for the smaller teams. So I think that pretty well covers the 2022 Mexican Grand Prix. Let me just hit the podium real quick. We had a Max Verstappen win, Lewis second, Sergio Perez P3. The Mexican crowd erupted as though, again, he had won the race. So that's always exciting. Happy for him to be now just the winningest Mexican driver at the Mexican Grand Prix. Pretty sure that's just like solidified history at this point. Everybody's going to love him down there from now on. So yeah, just fun stuff down there in Mexico this past weekend. But yeah, I'm ready to ready to move.
Oh, just one final note. So Max broke the record for most wins in a season as well.
Yeah, that's great.
As we've talked about, more races than they've had in other seasons. So the record is it's a weird comparison to make. I feel like win percentage is probably a better one to look at the end of the season. Or it's an easier comparison to make. It's still not the same, but nonetheless. Getting on into some League of Legos. One thing I saw just for the World Finals coming up that interested me and I thought was somewhat entertaining, they announced a co-stream, a Riot-sponsored co-stream that has a bunch of people who are not necessarily like League of Legends big personalities and whatnot from different areas, different regions. So it will probably be an interesting broadcast, but there was a bit of backlash from the community about the people who were picked and people who were like, wait, you didn't pick the people who actually have been grinding these co-streams all year long, like for all these regions to be on the official co-stream broadcast. So just a side note that I thought was interesting, because I saw that there was like a pretty big outcry of unhappiness. Similarly to F1 Twitter, League of Legends Twitter is not always the nicest place to be.
Damn. Well, that's a shame. I mean, whatever, man. I think it's just great that, like, for so long the company has held like sole broadcast rights, which has made like increasing the like tournament circuit all the more impossible. So, like, kind of shut up and just let them like expand the way that they're gonna allow their game to be broadcast. Like, it's already a dying thing anyway.
They're
like,
also not stopping like people from like co-streaming. So the other co-streamers are still allowed, but
they just put together a little panel of like featured co-streamers.
Yeah, that like are just not super involved in League of Legends, which is fine.
That's fine.
They tried to bring in personality. I think the goal is to get the average person to tune into that, like who wouldn't have previously. And so I agree,
where they're not talking about like the level 2 advantage and the last melee creep dies. Oh, there it is. Get the level 2 power spike. Oh, look at the 4v1 top lane. Like, dude, the macro is sick.
Yeah. So I thought it was like the idea behind it was good. I just thought it was like they I don't know, if they didn't want backlash they could have announced it differently, but either way I think people are there's always gonna be salty crackers in the box. So
salty crackers in the box. Yes, there is, sir.
But we've got 2 semifinals, best of 5s. We had T1 versus JD Gaming, and then we had DRX versus Gen G. Sorry, Damwon Gaming Kia, not around any longer. But two very, very good matchups, I think, and pretty exciting series. We'll start off with T1 and JDG. Where do you want to lead into that?
I mean, I just want to start off by saying, like, do you agree with me? These were 2 upsets.
I did
not
1.5 for me. I did feel like I felt like the T1 JD Gaming was a relatively even matchup.
Okay.
I thought the biggest concern for me on JD Gaming side was Kanavi, the biggest like positive on JD Gaming side was Kanavi versus Owner. Not that Owner's played poorly, but Kanavi has played out of his mind. I don't ever expect Faker to get dumpstered, so that versus Yigao, either way, I felt like was going to be a relatively like evenly matched like position. Gotcha. I thought that the positive side for T1 was the bot lane with Guma and Kyria, because Guma's just been playing nutty, and Kyria as well has been just a stud through the stages of Worlds so far. So not that Hope and Missing are bad, just like Owner isn't bad, but Kanavi's been playing like crazy, and like better. Similarly, Guma and Kyria, I thought, were playing very, very well throughout the tournament. And Hope and Missing, I just felt like they had the upper hand. So I really felt like that was more of a even matchup going in. But the Gen.G and DRX matchup, I was like, yeah, Gen.G is probably gonna 3-0 them. Like that was a heavy favorite in my opinion.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah, I'll live with the 1.5 upsets. But yeah, we could start with the T1 versus JDG series. I think in that first game, watching, so my worst fears began to like take hold when T1 was getting all the engages they wanted, finding all of the picks they wanted, getting every single 4v5 that they could ever hope for on that board, and JD Gaming beat them out every single time. They tried to like push that what they thought was an advantage, what every spectator would have said like, "Oh, that's an advantage." Oh,
Right.
they have one less player, but it really never mattered. So honestly, after that game 1, I was like, "Oh, this is bad." Like
Well,
T1 can't even beat them with man down.
and I will say, like, JD Gaming had taken advantages earlier in the game, so those 4v5s were not as lopsided in T1's favor because it's like 5 people versus 4 people who have more gold and items and things like that,
Sure.
or more power from all the dragons and
Sure.
everything that JD Gaming was getting. So, but I still expect T1 to win those fights. Like I'm not saying that like that I was like, oh yeah, 4v5 JD Gaming was so far ahead. They weren't, but I'm like less surprised than if it like it's an even
Mhm.
even levels, even gold and everything,
Yeah.
and T1 loses a 5v4. That would shock me, but JD Gaming played that out really well. I think the one of the big things was they didn't really let Guma get in on a lot of the fights. The Talia walls were huge in like isolating him. There were a couple times, including at the Baron towards the end of the game, that they threw the Talia wall and Guma was the only one on the other side, and he waited for the wall to drop because he didn't want to use his dash to go over the wall to join the fight, and his flash was down and have no ability to get back out if they dove on him, which I think is the right play, but just in part like put them at a disadvantage that much more. And also on T1 side, you have so much engage and you have so much like go in potential, but the
Mhm.
sustained damage that you're looking for is all from Guma. So keeping
Mhm.
him on the outside is so huge when you have Zeus go in and ult someone, and or Vi, owner on Vi, go in and ult someone, and then Faker dive in on top. If you don't have your sustained DPS there of the Lucian, you're just going to lose those fights. And
Mhm.
so I think JD Gaming played around that extremely well in game 1. I was
Mhm.
super impressed with how they played that out.
Well, and then they were ready to punish the couple of overextensions from T1. So it wasn't like they were like getting caught with their hands down. There were actually a couple of positions where T1 was overextending into them.
Yeah.
Faker like teleporting a little too early, getting himself called out. So yeah, not that T1 was like playing perfectly either. But yeah, JD Gaming was definitely able to take their advantages. I think Hope got like massive towards the end. He was dishing
Oh,
out some serious damage.
yeah.
But you're right. I think Yagal's walls ended up being one of the biggest like X factors in those mid game team fights.
Mm.
Shutting Gumayusi out, I would agree with you is a big point of the thing. I based on game one, like moving into game two, I thought the Jax was actually going to be a little bit higher priority. I thought the kind of tankiness he offered, the front line that he offered, 369, was going to be possibly one of the points of contention for the pick ban for T1. It actually ended up not going that route, which I was surprised at. But staying on that top lane, like I said, moving into game two, like I just was not convinced about the Malphite. They like
Yeah.
answered the Yone with it, but then even in game, I'm pretty sure it was like 18 minutes in, he couldn't even one shot the Lucian.
Oh yeah, and it was like they took advantage of that matchup big time because yeah, it's fine in the 1v1 against Yone. Like that's all fine and dandy until you have a Rise who's roaming all over the map constantly and locking you
Yeah,
up and throwing the AP damage out at you. I agree. I think that and the Belveth were two questionable picks for me. Not that
same.
Belveth has looked like particularly bad or anything. I just haven't seen enough from it. And when on the other side you have Owner who's sitting there on the Poppy who's knocking just tanks out of every team fight with his ultimate and then engaging on a 4v5 or a 5v4 then was just huge. And
Bringing what feels like more utility. Like the note that I
yeah,
have here about Belveth is like I just don't understand the strengths of it. Because you're right, I don't think we have seen it enough competitively to really know.
right. And without you and I playing a bunch of game, like me jungling her and getting a feel and like do
Right.
like all of that, I just didn't see. I understand like the what the champion can do. I just didn't see in this scenario what the champion does that's that much better than other jungle picks.
Right.
Even something like a Kindred, I feel like could be like a better pick in that scenario. You have mobility, you have the like consistent DPS and everything,
Mm,
gank potential. So a number of the things that you're getting with the Belveth that
mm.
just is a more valuable pick in my mind. The on the point
Just
of the
the
oh god
and you were probably just about to say this, was the jungle pool was pretty significantly pinched. We had Vi, Viego, Sejuani, Graves, and Lee Sin all banned away.
yeah.
So that does put you down to your, like second or third tier picks.
Yeah, and so I don't know if Kanavi is a Kindred player at all because that's something that got brought out in the Genji DRX series. But
Yep.
so it's definitely playable in general. But of course, I don't know what his full jungle champion pool is.
Right.
So it's possible that it's just like not in his realm. But the other thing I was going to say with the Jax, that was in game one a counter pick to the Camille. It was last picked, so I think that's probably why they didn't pull it out. In game two was that they saw the Yone come out, and Jax versus Yone is just not as good of a
Mm-hmm.
matchup as Jax versus Camille because of
Mm-hmm.
the snapback from the Yone being able to dodge out of the counter strike and all, as opposed
Sure.
to Camille having to like go in. So I think that's part of that. I wouldn't have been shocked to see 369 play it because he plays a pretty solid Jax, but yeah, I think the Malphite and some of the picks in game two were a little iffy. But nonetheless, if you're in a 1-0 lead in the world semifinals, I don't think it's unreasonable to also shift your pick ban to try and keep T1 on their toes and try and throw something different at them either. I don't think that's an unreasonable strategy. But then in game 3, they kind of go back to a much more standard strategy where T1 continues. And this is what I was saying in the quarterfinals, that I was a little bit like concerned for other teams versus T1, is that they are playing pretty non-standard champions. Not that they're like out of the meta, but these are picks that are not getting played very much. The Gangplank, the Nocturne, the Rise in particular, we have not seen very much in Worlds at all. Like, we've seen it in a few games here and there, but it's been banned out a couple times, but it is by no means a 100% pick ban. That is, Rise is at a 12% pick ban.
Right.
So,
well, to stick on that point, actually, I think the Rise was a big contributing factor to both of their wins in games 2 and 3. Like,
huge.
I actually don't think JDG, like, we can say all we want about the pick and ban, but when it came to like the mid game rotations and JDG having to answer that Rise, they did not know what to do. They kept prioritizing the dragons, and they kept prioritizing these like weird like Baron motions when Rise and the top laner were just pressuring inhibitors while you were taking like your second dragon or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, and I think that was just like macro outplay from T1.
100%. And I am not saying by any means that should not be played or anything like that. I'm just saying that my concern for other teams going against T1 from watching their quarterfinals matchup, I was like, they're playing weird shit. Like, they're playing things that other teams are not playing. Like, it's so easy to go and be like, Aatrox, we're just going to take Jax, this, we just take the other, like, normal meta matchup. And then T1's throwing out Gangplank, like, not just one, like, different pick. They're throwing out multiple of them. All at once. Like, the Yone picks as well. Like, things like that have not been standard in Worlds. Their only thing that they've kept pretty consistently standard is the bot lane picks.
They'll grab the Lucian Nami when they can, and they were even first picking Nami. Right. Yeah. So that's crazy. But then you go back and you look at their pick and ban in the quarterfinals against RNG. So let me just like rattle off the team comps real quick, because they are not similar. So Camille, Graves, Victor, Ashe, Heimerdinger, Jace, Viego, Akali, the Xayah, Renata Glask. And then you have Yone, Sedge, Akali, Varus, and then Tom Kench, and then you go and you look at all the team comps that they played. Yeah, we're seeing some shared champions across like in
right. Like, every game has like a couple of champions that you're seeing.
You're right. They're wildly different comps trying to win in wildly different ways. And then, going back to the Rise pick, here is this strategy that they locked in for 2 games and just nailed it home, something that JDG wasn't prepared for. But based on their diversity right now in pick and ban, you can't even be DRX and look at them and be like, okay, they're going to prioritize the Rise triple global comp, and like they're going to focus on the Lucian Nami, because that may be the thing where they're like, oh no, we actually care about like the Ashe Heimerdinger and we're going to pick the Victor this time. Oh, you didn't ban out Akali. Like, oh, we're actually just going to switch our team comp. Like, they're playing such a varied strategy that the Rise, it's just a drop in the pool is like what I'm getting at.
100%. And it's like they are picking, so I said the Rise 12% pick ban, Gangplank 12% pick ban, Nocturne 2.7% pick ban.
It was probably just that game, right?
It was just that game.
Crazy.
And I like these are things that other teams don't have practice playing against, so that's a huge advantage for T1. And
Mm-hmm.
like even in the picks themselves, so game 3, Faker on Rise versus Yi Gao on Azir. Equal
Mm-hmm.
pushing pressure, but you have so much map pressure from the Rise ult. Faker
Yeah.
was all over the map, and
Mm-hmm.
then in the late game, able to pressure side lanes, able to utilize the ult to escape multiple times out of scenarios that he
So
should have
nuts.
died in, like by using Fog of War and everything to ult out and get away. Like they just outplayed JDG with their team comp, and they played their team comp so well.
Mm-hmm.
That game, Zeus as well on the Gangplank, getting some really huge ults in some tight team fights that, or not ults, barrel chains in
Mm-hmm.
tight team fights to be able to like just annihilate multiple people on the JDG side was so big. And then going into game 4, that was just it was all T1
They
all
just, yeah,
day.
they just have momentum,
It's
and
huge.
and they even adjusted the team comp again, like after a series of just having like total comfort, honestly.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, pretty crazy. The only other comment that I want to say about that game 3 is like that was even in a world where 369 started the game like 3-1 or 4-1. Like he
Yeah.
popped off. Like that Renekton in any other scenario, the other team just would have been like, all right, we're just gonna go get drinks, like just FF at 15. Like this is just
Yeah.
done. But
They like started targeting him super hard later on.
mm,
Zeus, I think, did immensely well in that matchup. That is a tough matchup for the Gangplank early on,
mm-hmm,
and he was definitely like JDG played it from the get go like very well. They targeted their advantage super hard in that top
mm-hmm.
lane. But the scaling that T1 had just ended up outmatching, and their, like you said, the macro play, the pressuring of multiple different lanes, the
They
like
just couldn't handle it.
yeah, it's so tough to do. The Nocturne ultimate just to turn the lights out at multiple
Well,
instances was huge to just
and they could
like
just pick a fight like right when they want to. You have the Gangplank all come down, Nocturne's on top of you, Rise is on top of you with all the
yep.
other members. Like it just gives them such agency to
Oh my
just pull
god.
the trigger and say
Yeah.
you're called out, you're dead.
And like the thing that like I wouldn't be surprised to see Rise just consistently get banned in the finals because
Sure, easy.
the macro movement potential of him as well is just unreal. Going from winning like any time that I see a team win a team fight and then immediately just rise all 5 members to Baron, and I'm like, oh,
Epic.
I'm like that's just busted. Like you killed
Mm-hmm.
one person and you just get a free Baron. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's insane.
But
But
more
like
importantly, I don't think Zeka's gonna play it.
no,
So they're not gonna
yeah.
be like picking it away.
It's not in his typical champion pool of worlds at least, but
Not what
yeah.
we've seen, yeah.
But game 4, it was Guma and
That was
Kyria were
roll.
just absolutely disgusting in the bot lane and just led to winning everywhere. I think they had multiple 5-man or 5-0 deaths, 5-kill aces throughout the
Mm-hmm.
game. It was just like I was like, when is it gonna be over? I feel bad. Like that was a brutal. That is a really rough way to end your time at Worlds, is to like have some pretty good games and then just to get like beat down in the last one pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
But T1 back to the World Finals, first time in 5 years for Faker.
Mm-hmm.
And he's playing very well. I felt like Guma was my big MVP of that series, but I did feel like Faker was playing pretty Faker level from previous worlds in that
Sure.
he fit his role very well, had some really solid play. So
Well, and I keep going back to the like 3-2 advantages that they were able to get on the JDG inhibitors. Like
mm,
that felt like, yeah, okay, he's not making the like insane outplays or whatever, but I would argue that play in the top lane where he gets out, ults back to the lane,
huge.
that's an outplay. Just like from the macro
Oh,
perspective, I feel like this guy like doesn't even have to flash your ults anymore. Like he's seeing the ones and zeros in a different way. Like he was pressuring the map in a way that we haven't seen players really do it yet. So I'm interested to see moving into the next series, like how DRX is going to be able to handle that. I
yeah.
think,
Especially not mid laners doing that. I feel like we see it
sure,
a lot from the top lane just because the meta is a lot of these like 4-1 kind of comps when you have a Fiora or an Aatrox where you're just like, yeah, go to the side lane. The rest of us will do our thing over here.
yeah,
Like this was a bit different because of the ability for him to move around and like join in on those plays. So I'm excited to see Faker back in the World Championship in the finals.
I agree.
It's gonna
And to
be
be fair,
fun.
I thought JDG was going to be like their biggest competition, and there you go.
So I guess that tells everyone who Justin thinks or what Justin's prediction for the finals is. But
Dude, I just won 4 for Faker, and then it's like solidified in stone.
I mean,
He's
I
it.
think that would be sick because we like last year at Worlds we were talking about, oh well, if Chovy gets like another one, he's like right on the cusp, like
Right.
he's right there now. Like it is Faker gonna be the GOAT for forever? I think this definitely puts him in the right direction. We've still got a finals best of
Sure.
series, of course, but moving along to Gen G versus DRX, that was also a very interesting series because, like you said, huge upset overall in the way that panned out.
Big time. And I think like the big note that I have coming out of it is I think this is the first time that we've seen Chovy really show some like cracks in the armor. I was pretty disappointed to see the like immense focus on the Silas
Mm.
be pretty rigid in that, and then the other performances like on the Galio and the Rise, like not even, or on the Rise and the Azir, like not even look that great. So I'm curious how strong his champion pool actually was. If there's such a priority on the Silas that doesn't get ahead, then where really are they? So it was a very different look for Gen G that was pretty unfortunate, really.
Yeah, I would definitely agree but I mean, not to knock DRX, but I think that Chovy, I mean, he showed that Azir and Silas were his main champions. Like that's what he was primarily playing throughout Worlds
Right.
as much as he could.
Right.
And I agree. I think the reliance on that is questionable because when you do see him on other champions, like you said, the Azir, the Rise, it just was not quite what you were looking for. And Zeka on the other side, I think this is why I'm excited to see DRX in the finals. Is he seems so versatile. Like he played the Azir in game one and definitely got stomped out, but the whole team did. in that first game. They lost that first one hard, bounced back, but he bounces back on the Ari in the mid lane, a champion again that is not being played a lot, but it fit their composition very well. They have a lot of outside damage. That gives some great pick potential that they're able to have that chase down and everything. You have the huge range from the Caitlyn and the Lux to just pump in later damage with their ultimates. So if you get the great engages from Kingen on the Gragas or from an Ari charm and then have all of this go in, they played to their team comps style very well, even though it wasn't a super bloody game. There's I think that's hugely in part due to the threat of that team comp. Like, there's so much potential for 5v5 fights to go poorly for Gen G that they almost avoided it, to the extent of it being a 12 kill 40-minute game. Like, that's crazy. That's not what you see.
And most of the kills were off the back of a charm hit by Zeka and his willingness to flash forward. Interestingly, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't feel like that's something we see out of players a whole lot, but he really goes for it, or at least, like we saw in the Akali, dashing over the Azir wall, flashing out. Like, he was flashing forward on Orianna in their in some of their opening games. So this guy is super aggressive, and when DRX was winning fights, like, it really was off the back of Zeka. Either his charm accuracy was insanely high, or it was his like mid fight, like jostling rotations.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of times that Gen G lost Zeka like in Fog of War and he just like showed up and was able to mark ruler, it happened like way too many times. Like, his explosiveness on the Akali was just insane. Like, a 7-0-2 game, he went wild. So maybe this is a little bit of Zeka's meta, with assassins being like so powerful right now, dashes being huge. I think we may be getting a little bit of that going on, but yeah, he's I think he's gonna match up pretty well against Faker, like you were saying. Excited for that matchup.
Yeah, and I think that you highlighting him flashing forward on the Orianna definitely like highlights it more than this series, because flashing forward on Ari with the Ari ult changes is definitely different, because hey, I can flash in, and if I get this kill, then I still get an ult reset and can like hop out. Or with the Akali, you're like, I have the mobility, I have my shroud, I have the ult to get away or anything if you need to. But on an Orianna, like, that is the epitome of like balls to the wall. Like, you're going in, and if you flash in on that, you have no chance of getting out. You're flashing in because you're winning that, or going home potentially. So that's huge. But yeah, I think after that game one getting stomped, their mental held super well. Piosik was so good in the rest of the series as well. On the Kindred, on the Viego, I wasn't super high on Gen G, going with some of their picks, particularly the Ezreal Karma. I wasn't like super keen on. I just feel like there's better champions out there. Even like an Ashe Karma in the kind of matchup that you're going into, I think would have been pretty solid, because you do have the sustained outside damage with the Azir and the Ashe in that scenario. You have the tankiness up front from Sejuani and Trundle to keep people off of the Ashe in the team fights. You don't need to rely on that Ezreal shift and everything to get moving around team fights. I think it was a ruler comfort pick.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work out, particularly with like how well DRX just was playing. Like they came out strong and carried it through. And in game 4 with Zeka on the Galio, like that was
Mm-hmm.
another nice side to see him playing again, that control mage type champion, and with Faker bringing out the Rise in particular, I think that's a great potential counter pick in the mid lane. Not
Mm-hmm.
because you are gonna like neither one of them is going to stomp that lane, but just to be able to roam and bring the assistance was something
Mm-hmm.
lacking on the side of JDG when Faker was breaking that out.
Well, I mean, you could argue that Talia like can kind of answer. It's just a little slower. Um, the one difference I want to say about the Galio picks is, and this kind of speaks to the aggressiveness of Zeka. Zeka's Galio
Oh,
was running Predator.
yeah, I meant Faker on Rise, the Rise Galio matchup, as opposed to the
Oh,
Galio Talia.
oh,
But yeah, like I'm like, if Faker breaks out the Rise, he has that in his pocket that he can play. But I agree, the
yeah, that makes sense.
having the Predator is also, I think, big for that, because he was still playing it aggressively, like charging in for those taunts and everything as well.
Yeah,
So
it was
like
wild.
it gives you the ability to still play that supportive play style and be where you need to be on the map, but he still played it in a pretty aggressive way.
Yeah, I would say so. That was definitely some skill expression, in my opinion. But yeah, overall, I think we had two like really, really exciting series. Overall, DRX here showed up like insanely better than, I don't know why I kept underrating them every time. But yeah, they've gone from play-ins all the way to the finals.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. Like they this is the first time I think that a team from play-ins has gone all the way to the finals. It's the first 4 seed that has gone to the finals. I'm pretty certain. So they're doing things that are not heard of for their position coming into
Yeah.
Worlds, and they've hit their stride very well. And Zeka, I think, is the biggest part of that. The man is playing like a demon out there. Like he is a scary matchup like that. Like he is shown his stuff, and props to him because he's making some exciting matchups and games.
It also helps to have depth on your team, who's traditionally
Oh,
has been touted as one of the better like positional AD carries.
100%. Like I
That
didn't
helps.
didn't talk about him, but he played very well this series as well. Like his positioning, his play, he loves those. Like I mean, he looked phenomenal on the Varus. He looks great on those like outside ranged 80 carries and all. And so, but he played to perfection pretty much throughout the series.
Yeah, and it's always fun to see a team where both of the carries are like play through a bull, right? Where
Yeah.
you could pick for Deft, you could pick for Zeka, you could pick to like play through either of them. The so just one last note on the DRX series, we didn't hit it. The Kindred on the Elder Dragon in game 2,
Mm.
where like Peanut stuck around just a little too long. Like I think that was a moment where it's like, oh, that's what Kindred all does. Like they should have just not been there. Like that
Mm.
felt like a telegraph play that was always going to happen. They were just going to keep the Elder Dragon alive, and he was just like still in there when like when it all went down. It's like, oh no.
Yeah,
So
it's just like
I think
a
good pick.
brain fart in the situation, just being like, I forgot that that's how the interaction works. Like,
And maybe that's like not what happened. Maybe he understood it perfectly, but it just felt
eh,
like kind of an outplay from Piochik and the side of DRX
yeah,
there,
and
in that fight.
maybe it's, oh hey, I'm on Graves, I have burst, I can maybe like
Sure.
get him super low, make him pop the ult early. Maybe that's the play there, but yeah, that was a definitely highlight for Piochik in that second game.
Hmm.
So, but very exciting finals ahead of us coming up this weekend on Saturday. So we have T1 versus DRX, a all LCK finals. It's going to be a banger. I'm really hoping for a great series because these are two teams that have been very fun to watch.
Hmm.
And I'm looking forward to a fun series for the finals.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm looking forward to hearing "Star Walkin'" live by Lil Nas X. I think that's going to be an interesting part of the performance. That has been one of the better like world songs.
Oh, tip top.
So yeah, I'm kind of actually excited to hear that live. And yeah, I agree. Hoping for the best of fives. Hopefully they mute the silver scrapes. But yeah, I think it's going to
What
be a good Saturday.
champion is Little Nas X gonna dress as for the performance?
Timo.
Ooh,
I mean, he dresses the devil in that one video, didn't he? He's just gonna come
there we
out in a
go.
Teemo costume. People are gonna be like, "Ah, he's reusing the costume.
Yeah,
It's the devil."
but he's not. It's Timo.
It's Teemo.
It's not the devil. It's just Timo.
Can we all have a moment of silence for the one Teemo game that was played this year at Worlds and did amazing, obviously? And the moment's over. Thank you.
You're welcome. But yeah, so we'll have finals coverage next week. Justin, I know you had a little other esports to
It
mention.
doesn't matter. I kind of want to get you to the Phillies game. We're pushing it.
Nah, that's all right. There's
I mean,
there's
like
plenty of innings.
all right, literally all I could say is that like it's been fun to watch it. Fury is doing pretty good.
Okay, that's all I was gonna
And
say. What teams are you looking out for? So Furia's one. Any other?
Furia, Mouse is likely moving through. That's probably an organization name that you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving into the next phase is like when it'll be interesting and there's like actually fun players to talk about. But my player to look out for, his name is Queserado on
Ooh,
Furia.
I know his name.
There you
Yeah.
go. Right now, I'm pretty sure my boy is the highest rated player at the tournament right now, like based on his in-game stats. So, like, dude, my man is popping off. So,
Is
like,
he an
if you're
upper?
gonna go
Is
back,
he like what does he
I don't
typically?
really know the roles that well,
Is he
but he
snipe or
is
does
one
he
of their like
rush?
fragger. I think he's
Okay.
rushing in.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Cause
So, if you're going back and watching maps, Furious Queserado is pretty strong.
very cool. I'll have to
Yeah,
check it
that's all I
out.
have to say about I Am Rio. We'll get into it more as the tournament goes
Yeah.
on. This is just a challenger stage, but it's been very exciting so far, so I'm definitely going to stay tuned. And we'll talk about stacking more next week.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
There you go.
But then, do you want to go ahead and get into the flavor of the week and get the people on out?
Oh, I'm just going to slam through these really quick. So my music here this week, and I wasn't thinking about current events, but I was listening to College Dropout on vinyl, and I was really enjoying it.
Oh, I
Um,
mean, I nothing wrong with that. Like
sure.
he's put out great music, but yeah,
I agree. I agree.
I the old stuff's better anyway.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough. And it sounds great on vinyl, to be fair. So I definitely enjoyed my playthrough of that. My food here for the week, Sarah picked up some everything bagel hummus that doesn't have like
Ooh,
any of the like preservatives in it or anything. It said like eat it in
nice.
like 30 seconds after you open it. And the chickpea taste was so dense and like really good. So I'm kind of in love with that hummus.
So you
And
did
then
eat it in 30 seconds after you opened it.
all gone.
Love it.
I'm a disgusting human being, Aaron.
Same.
And then my visual medium here for the week. I couldn't remember what movie we watched, so clearly must have been great, and I loved it. But no, my visual medium here for the week is Assetto Corsa. I talked about it last week. I set the goal for myself that on the first of the month, I've been patient, so I'm gonna buy myself a little racing game here. So I've got that all downloaded, and I've been waiting for the right opportunity here to get locked into my racing seat. So I think tomorrow I'm going to have a pretty good opportunity. So I'm just looking forward to getting back behind the wheel in some sim racing.
Nice. You'll have to let us know how it is. I've heard good things about the game, so looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah, I think it was the best option for like an affordable, gonna be like pseudo up to date
Yeah.
sim racer, for a not that great sim driver. But that's enough out of me. Aaron, I want to hear about your flavor of the week.
Cool. So my flavor of the week for my food, similar to that for you, it's something that I'm looking forward to. I am making some beef jerky. I haven't done that in a while, so I'm excited to get that finished up. It's marinating right now with some good old teriyaki and lots of crushed red pepper. So dehydrate that and have some yummy beef jerky for a snack. My music this week, I've been kind of struggling with figuring out what I want to listen to. Nothing's really like jumped out as particularly like appealing. I sometimes go through that phase where I'm just like skipping from playlist to playlist. And I'm like, none of this is what I want.
Sure.
So I decided to just go with the Callum, I forget his last name, Tiesto remix of Dancing on My Own. That is the Phillies, that is the song of the playoffs for the Phillies. So Dancing on My Own, go Phils. And for my visual medium, this one's a little more interesting. Colleen and I were convinced by her brother to watch the movie Barbarian on HBO, and it is wild. One, the main person in it's a horror movie, just the epitome of stupid horror movie main character where they're just like, just leave. Like, you're good. Just go. Like, fuck everyone else. You don't have to die. Just get out of there. And they're like, no, I gotta go back and do the thing. I gotta blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Damn.
you got out. Go.
Oh,
Don't die. Like, you can. You literally can. Just leave.
right. He has plot armor.
Like, yeah, but didn't just take, like, I don't know, crazy, too much, but in general, I don't want to give too much away. Very interesting movie. Initial idea is girl shows up to an Airbnb type deal. Someone else had also booked it on another site. The guy's already there. She shows up. They're like, oh, what do we do? It's a terrible neighborhood that we're renting this Airbnb at, and it's nighttime. But they're not the only ones in the house. And so that's where I'll leave that. So, interesting horror movie.
Where does the barbarian part come in?
Oh, it comes in. Not the
Into the
only
house?
Not the only ones in the house, Justin.
There's a barbarian in the
The
house?
barbarian is there.
What is this, like the Brendan Fraser movie? Was he like locked in like
No,
the ice fridge?
No, there's hidden passageways.
Uh,
So, but I won't spoil anymore. I will give a little warning. Not the best movie I've watched. Very bizarre though, and like if you're looking for a bizarre horror movie, go for it. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to people.
All right.
But
All right. I like that rec.
sticks out as
It's an honest wreck.
it's a standout of the past week. But that is
Okay.
my flavor of the week. So that does, of course, wrap up the episode for us this week for the ladies and gentlemen. As always, thank all of you for listening, spending time with us. We appreciate it very much. We love doing this. You can always hear us on Google Podcasts, Spotify. Check us out on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what your flavor of the week is. But thank you all again for listening along.
New episodes every Thursday. Get the audio version, get the video version. Tell a friend. Like Aaron said, just thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. This has been another edition of the Tall and Short of It podcast. Peace out, everybody.
Later. Go Phils.